This episode is brought to you by Future Group, delivering smarter, safer, and more sustainable solutions for the built environment. From fire safety to lighting and electrical, cutting-edge EV charging, advanced security systems, regeneration works, and full-scale decarbonisation, we've got your property needs covered. Trusted by property managers across the UK. Visit future-group.uk. Future Group, leading today for a better tomorrow.
Welcome to another episode of Beyond Four Walls, and today I'm joined by someone whose name has become synonymous with dedication, leadership and longevity in the property management world, Adam Coombs. And Adam began his journey with Hillcrest Estate Management back in 2005 as an estate manager, and over 2 decades he rose through the ranks to become managing director in 2018, leading the business through a period of remarkable growth from a close-knit team of 8 to nearly 50 and from 3,000 to 7,000 managed units. And he recently announced he was stepping down from his role, sharing heartfelt words on LinkedIn that touched on gratitude, reflection and the importance of people in our industry. And in this episode, we're going to explore Adam's 20-year journey, the highs, the lessons, the challenges and what comes next. And we'll talk about how the industry has evolved, what true leadership looks like in a people-first profession, and what it feels like to take a step back after pouring your heart into a company for so long. So Adam, welcome to Beyond Four Walls. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
How do you feel? 20 years, that's mad.
Yeah, it's a long time. Yeah, it doesn't feel real yet. Yeah, officially my last day was yesterday, but I actually stopped working on Friday the 28th. So I've had a week last week. Obviously the UK has been bathed in beautiful sunshine, so it's been a great week to be off. Doesn't feel like it's sort of actually finished work. It just feels like I've gone on holiday, but without that sort of extra stress in the back of my mind about got to get on that email, got to fix that tomorrow, send that to a client. So yeah, it's been quite a nice transition to start with.
Yeah, definitely. So take us back then to 2005 and what led you to join Hillcrest in the first place?
Well, I previously worked in leasehold in London. I worked for a couple of the councils. So I started my journey at Southwark Council back in 2001 as a leasehold officer. I actually went in as a temp, as you sort of, a lot of those councils would generally bring in temps, and eventually they made me into a permanent role. So I was there for a couple of years, and then moved on to the Kensington and Chelsea tenant management organisation. Again, a similar role, leasehold management. Obviously, sort of bigger portfolio, different buildings. Definitely around there. We're obviously managing some very expensive stock in those sort of areas, which was a real change from sort of Southwark. There's a lot of sort of depravity there and real challenges around sort of people being able to find money to pay service charges. So very different experiences. And then that was the last time I had a career break. Actually, I was living in London and decided I wanted to move out of London. I've been there for 10 years. I'm actually a Devon, Bristol boy originally by heart. So I've been down here a long time and thought maybe now's the time to move. So yes, I went off traveling for 6 months, came back, was going to change career. Thought, what do I like to do? I was really interested in music and marketing and events and had quite good organization skills. So I thought that'd be great to go into. But of course, came back, was absolutely broke, living with my parents, needed to get a job and saw a job advertised at Bristol Property Management. I'd moved back home to Devon at the time and I phoned up the recruiter. His name was Joe Goss.
The lovely Joe.
Yeah, the infamous Joe. We had a good chat, great bloke. And he sort of thought, oh yeah, he'd be really good for this role. So went up for an interview and, got the job. And 20 years later, that's sort of that's where time goes. It's unbelievable, really.
Yeah, crazy. I mean, do you remember anything particularly, vividly about those early days and being chucked into the
It was
into the
so
deep
different.
end?
It was so different back then. I mean, when I had my leaving do, I had caught up with a couple of old colleagues. Email was still in its infancy. We were generally replying to letters. I had a
Yeah.
physical in tray. So actually the time you got to respond to leaseholders was quite a lot of time. You got a letter, you'd write your draft, you'd send it out. We were getting faxes. That makes us sound really old or makes me sound really old.
No, I'm with you there, mate. Don't worry.
So yeah, very different experience. The pressure was a lot less in terms of that sort of immediate responses required. So it felt like quite a calm environment. I also generally felt, I mean, it was difficult because actually when they came in, the Bristol sort of portfolio that was linked to the business had only been purchased the year before by the owners who actually were based in Essex,
Right.
and it hadn't been particularly well looked after. So when it came in, there was suddenly a lot of, unhappy leaseholders. There was a lot of work to do. A lot of people were looking to leave. So, it's a pretty quick get in, get stuff done, turn stuff around quickly, which, I felt I helped to do at that time. So it was already sort of an immediate sort of satisfaction about providing good service, getting good contractors out, replying to people, getting things done. So yeah, it sort of had some good early job satisfaction. And like I said, the team was obviously very small as you introduced. It was 8 of us then. Sort of my old boss, who was locally Bristol based, it turned out that he wasn't actually really doing any work. We sort of found out after I've been there a few months. He had a sideline as a photographer, a wedding photographer, and he'd always leave really early to go to site visits. Seen nothing of it. Property manager, that's what you do.
Mhm.
And it was only really actually after he left, about sort of 6 months later, that the sites he was going to see had no grounds, no communal areas, and he was going there sort of, at least once a week. So, it became a bit apparent that actually he was off to do something else and his heart wasn't really in it. So,
Mm,
and then he obviously eventually left and he was the most senior person in that Bristol team. So
yeah.
naturally it kind of needed someone to step up. Yeah, the Arthurs who own the business were actually based out of Essex, Ingatstone. So, quite a long way away for being hands-on, I guess.
At what point did you transition from estate manager to managing director? That was a few years obviously in between and learning the ropes and all that kind of stuff. How was that jump for you though, going from employee to boss, really?
It was challenging, I
Mm,
think, because I didn't really ever fully step away from the property manager role. I was obviously property manager, then sort of senior property manager, sort of moved into director role. I think when the owners could see I was, doing a lot to win business in Bristol, doing the marketing, new business, branding, effectively I was doing everything else as well as being a property manager. So,
mm,
they acknowledged that with sort of, salary and titles. But it wasn't until actually Hillcrest got purchased by the Trinity Property Group in 2018 when the Arthur's sold and disappeared, and these new guys came on board, and at that point I had a portfolio of, I think, 40 properties, and so, including some of our key clients. So
hmm
I think they were quite surprised I was running such a large portfolio, plus being a director, running the offices in Bristol, and doing everything else. And at that point they said, probably need to shift some of your portfolio away, Adam, so you can concentrate on actually running the business, because
Yeah.
that's what they needed at that point, because obviously the two owners had left and they needed someone to step in. So yeah, that was the kind of point. So it was quite a sort of an urgent transition in some ways, find someone to take over my portfolio. I still kept a couple of the larger key clients at
Mm,
that point for a few more years. So, I didn't really step away from full property management until a couple of years ago for my
yeah.
sins. I mean, there were some clients I have managed for literally 16, 17 years. And that was great because, you build such amazing relationships with certain directors that it becomes hard to
Yeah.
give them over. They don't want you to go. And you know the site so well, it's almost like it's easier to just stick with it. But,
Yeah.
in hindsight, as you know, trying to do a dual role is very difficult. I think we've seen that when we're trying to grow our team here. You can't really be a property manager and a team leader and something else. You're either
Yeah.
one or you're the other. And actually, I think it would have been better if I'd transitioned quicker away from property management to be more hands-on in the business. But,
Mm,
these are the kind of things you see when you're not in it every day and just
yeah.
spinning 800 plates that we all do in this job.
Absolutely. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, and like you quite rightly said, it sometimes is easier just to carry on managing because you've got to then train the next person in the way that that client particularly likes and the reason why they're staying with you in the first place. And sometimes if it's, as you say, it's easy because it's natural to you, if you
Yeah.
see what I mean. It's not something you've got to learn and that sort of stuff. But was there a particular moment when you transitioned from estate manager to managing director, was there a moment where you felt like a leader, if you like, for the first time? Is there a story that you can tell or?
I think, COVID was probably quite an interesting time, wasn't it?
Hmm
For us all. I guess, being a sort of smaller business, I think that was one of the positives actually of having been part of the larger group at that point. They had some processes in place. I think if we'd been still on our own at that point, would have more struggled. But, I remember being sort of in the office and literally telling people to pick up their PCs, walk out the door, go home, not knowing what was coming. That felt like a sort of a moment of, right, everyone's, relying on me to get us through this, and all of us at that point didn't know what was coming, how long it was going to last, what it really meant for
Yeah.
us all. Uh, as we touched on, the weather was amazing. So there was one, the one thing
It
that when
was.
COVID started, we had the best summer ever, which actually as property
Yeah.
managers is really important. It's
Mm.
amazing how many people sort of think, oh, you talk about the weather a lot, but being quite nerdy, I used to keep a weather diary when I was a property manager, and I used to record the weather in it, write it down on a piece of paper every day in that diary for many, many, many years. And it was really Joe likes that sort of effect because he's quite nerdy, but just really helped to sort of track different weather patterns. Or if you had an insurance claim, you could look back and go, oh, yes, actually, there was a storm that day. We can
Mm.
go back and look at that. Or, why is that building really suffering with condensation? Well, actually, because we had the worst winter ever and it didn't stop raining for 5 months and the building's not dried out. So it's
Yeah.
those little things. But yeah, I guess COVID was a real time to try and lead that team through this real unknown that we all went through. I think on a general level, it was a sort of a tough time for property managers and what we did, because I know
Mm.
probably more than 75% of people I knew who basically got furloughed or didn't have to do anything and sat around in the sunshine, and we were as busy as we always were.
But not
Leaseholders,
quite knowing if we could go into communal areas or if we could. We obviously couldn't
exactly.
go into people's flats, which we don't do anyway. But can we go into communal areas? Because not really anybody there. But there's people outside, so can we go near them? Can we cut the grass? It was all very confusing, wasn't it? Certainly the first lockdown when everything just shut and you just didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, it was a real sort of stumble your way through it, again with sort of, what we're doing, all the new legislation, the Building Safety Act and fire
Mm,
safety and cladding, it's all been sort of, there's been a lot to learn since sort of almost that time. It's about like every year there's been something big that's come along that we've all had to react to together as individuals, as a business, as an industry, and kind of go, right, how do we get through this? So yeah, that was definitely an interesting time. Actually, what was nice in the beginning was all leaseholders were really kind to us for quite a few
they
weeks where
were. They were
the
actually, yeah.
emails were like, hope you're okay, hope you're staying safe. And then, that quickly tailed off, I think.
Yeah, yeah, you could say that. But with the business growing so quickly, like you say, from 8 to nearly 50 employees, how did you keep or maintain the company culture to be as positive as it was when it was a small team?
It has been hard. I mean, I think actually the COVID change was one of the hardest parts, because we went from quite predominantly being in the office every day based team, pre-COVID, which meant we had obviously a really strong team ethos, lots of, you just could share phone calls, you'd share stories, you'd see when someone was upset, you could really get on it quickly. And obviously the shift to home working, I think, was challenging. That meant we had to sort of, you had to reach out more, you had to be more, are people okay, checking in, which is obviously, it was okay in the COVID times because we were having lots of online meetings, lots of team calls. But then obviously, now everyone wants a different work-life balance. Hybrid working is absolutely the way for quite
Hmm.
a majority of the team at Hillcrest, especially sort of property manager side. So, and that's harder, people don't sort of see their impact if they're not in the office doing something that other people see supports them. Whereas if you hear your colleague picking up the phone and dealing with a difficult call that wasn't for them, you're going to do the same thing.
Mm,
The silo mentality is something we've talked about. We talk about a lot in our sort of leadership training about making sure people feel they're part of a team. And for me, that has always been really, really important at Hillcrest, to make sure people feel welcome, be really team based, because, retention in the industry is hard, getting good people in is hard. So actually, if you've got them, you really want to keep them. And you've got to do that by trying to look after them and support them as best as possible. But I think there's a real transition period from being sort of, when you're 8, 10, 15 people to suddenly going up to 50, because then you have to create more middle tiers. You have
mm,
to have these middle leaders, like I talked about earlier, someone who's stepping away from property management to be a team leader. And
yeah.
that obviously takes time to transition, and you have to go through that bumpy period where, people are wearing two hats for a little bit, and there's a bit of pressure on while they're sort of, overworked, pulled by a client, pulled by their team. But I
Mm,
think once you get to that structure in place, as you grow in size, then yeah, that's really key, isn't it?
yeah.
And having the other support areas, isn't it? It's an HR team, it's a compliance team now, it's a legal team. As you'll know, it in these smaller businesses, there's a pinch point where you go, oh God, you're getting outside support, you're bringing in other people there, and there comes
Mm,
a time when you go, actually, we've got to create our own team. We need that internally now, and that comes at a
yeah.
cost, which means comes at a management fee increase.
Of course, of
These things that
course.
go with that.
Yeah, and I suppose from a leadership style side of things as well, if you're going from being one of the team to suddenly being their team leader, it's making sure that the culture is supportive enough to know that that person is therefore supported, because that is a tricky transition, I think, especially if going from an estate manager to a director is one thing, but going up a small level to a team leader when you're managing the people that you used to work alongside, and for a period of that time you're still working alongside because you're still got that portfolio. I mean, is there have you got any tips around how that can, how you helped with that as a leader?
I think as you know, it comes down to sort of there's a bit of coaching, isn't there? I think in terms of trying to sort of get people to improve their leadership skills. In all honesty, there are some people who are good leaders and there are some people who are good property managers, and that doesn't always mix. The person who's been there the longest, you not necessarily want to promote into a team leader because they're not very good at leading people, but they're absolutely
Mm,
amazing at managing buildings and working with clients. And I think it's trying to see in your team, where that fits the best and who wants to progress. And you've got to ask really honest conversations. I think, what I've learned in the last few years is actually trying to really gauge from people what they want to do. We've got a really good senior property manager who has been with us for 5 or 6 years, who's amazing, but it's like, I don't want to line manage any people, Adam. I don't want to have that side of it. I'm happy to support on this and do that and have some of the complicated buildings, but line management, not for me. But
yeah,
it's
not my
great.
bag.
Yeah, and that's fine. If and I didn't know that, would have probably pushed that person into a line management role because that's what we thought that, it's career progression, that's what they want. So I think really drilling down on what each individual wants to achieve within the business is really key. I think again we found out a few things a bit too later on when people have sort of decided to leave that actually if we'd told them what we might have been thinking about them for the future, we possibly could have kept them in the business. So yeah, I think being really open, honest, transparent, supporting, as part of the wider group at Trinity, we've got sort of really good training schemes. So, we've got people who come down and deliver leadership training skills and other training across the teams. And again, I think
Mm,
that's really important because people don't, I didn't train to be a managing director. It just became one because I was here the longest and,
yeah.
and had an interest in performing in other areas of the business. But again, I never had any training of being a director or anything until more recently. And it's those
Mm.
sort of key elements I thought, oh, actually, there's, some good points I've learned from that, which I think I'd want to, take forward.
Yeah. Is there anything from a leadership perspective that you've learnt the hard way?
I mean, I think it is I need to, if I looked back at my errors, it would be, I need to delegate more,
Hmm.
a bit like keeping that portfolio for a bit too long. I'm sure, as I step away from the business now, they're going to be looking at things going, well, why was Adam still doing that and doing this and doing that? And I know I was involved in stuff that was below my grade and I shouldn't have been doing is more admin. But again, you just do it because it's quicker, you've done it forever, it's easier.
Yeah.
And there's a certain element of, what makes a good property manager. There's a sort of it's keeping control of everything, isn't it? That's what makes good property managers. They're quite
Mm.
they want to be in control of everything. So I think, yeah, you've got to look at your support systems. I had a great team. I should have leaned on them a bit more, and then that also helps them to grow themselves and take on other parts of roles within the business that becomes more interesting rather than just, oh, it's that job today and I've got to do that again. A lot of the job we can might not monotonous, but it's very samey sometimes.
Yeah.
Certainly, a lot of it is answering emails these days. That's quite a high area. But
Mm.
yeah, I think that would be my biggest thing I'd want to change in the future. And
Yeah.
I said,
Learn how to delegate.
yeah, and I said earlier, it's just when you're in it, isn't it? It's really
Yeah.
hard to sort of, stuff's coming in all the time. You're trying to keep everyone happy. Being able to take that time to step back and go, oh, wait a minute, what actually could improve the business at this point, or my role and who else is looking for a new challenge? What can we bring in? Because again, that's how other people grow. Might look at a different role in the business that might suit them, whether that's moving
Mm.
into compliance or, obviously high risk building schemes, actually sort of trying to get their skill set to suit how the business is growing. It might be property managers who go, we're getting to a certain point where, what happens to all property managers, I think, when they get to the point where they've had enough of dealing with leaseholders, but they want to stay at the company. They want to just be in a different role.
Yeah.
And really trying to support that, I feel is really good because if you keep
Mm.
good people in the business, then that's a massive success, in my opinion.
And sometimes you just need a little bit of a break. It's not that you don't like dealing with leaseholders, or you sometimes you just need to pause and see if there is something else. And
Hmm.
that, as you say, that doesn't mean leaving the business. It might mean that, you drop part of your portfolio and you focus on part of it on compliance, or as you
Yeah.
say, or you help more on the legal side of things, sales packs, or something like that. But yeah, sometimes you just need to pause, don't you, and just think, actually, what is it that I want to do, and how are my skills fitted in that area. But you touched then on trying to keep everyone happy, which leads me on to my question of how client behavior has evolved over the years. Any thoughts on that?
I think we all know the industry is challenging. I was looking at the sort of stats the other day, and like I said, we've got 7,000 units or 7,000 leaseholders to deal with. You add in how many people in a flat and tenants, etc. We're dealing with a lot of people all the time.
Mm.
But actually, when I sort of try and remind my guys when they've had, that same horrible email from the same horrible person, that's the one person in that one building who's really difficult, and the other 20 who live there are actually pretty reasonable and nice. But it just so happens that person's the one who's going to email you all the time and be quite negative. So I think when you look at the stats overall, we've probably got, 7,000 leaseholders, and there's probably a couple of hundred that are challenging. And sometimes they're right to be challenging. They're asking the
Yeah.
right questions. Sometimes they are just difficult individuals. Communal living is not for everyone, I often say. But yeah, I do think it's evolved in that sort of way, isn't it? Or just how people communicate by email can be quite aggressive. The amount of emails people send, we've got a director on a big blocks, and he can sometimes send 20 emails a day. It's just, and I'm not sure how any person in any managing agent is meant to really deal with that. It's a
Mm.
sort of a brain dump. And again, you could be the most organized person in the world. You can't keep on top of that and do your other parts of the role as well. So
No.
for me, I think it's about how you control those communications.
Hmm.
In this job, especially as a property manager, even on the accounting side, in most of them, communication is absolutely key. I think we talk about it all the time. We talk about it in the industry, don't we?
Yeah.
Communicate. Even if you haven't got anything to communicate, tell them you haven't got anything to tell them at this time, almost.
Yeah.
You can't be told off for sending too many emails, always felt. And I feel if you can get on top of that, you're almost getting in front of stuff. But it is the negativity. Certainly some of my property management team who've left more recently have found it really negative, dealing with a few certain clients who were just sort of, we were quite rude to them. You have to send them the procedure, the sort of behavior procedure, unreasonable
Yeah.
behavior policy that,
Yeah.
is out there, and just reminding people. But, you've had people turn up on the front door trying to kick it in to come in, you've had, just pretty horrible incidents. And, it comes out
Mm.
in the poll, doesn't it, that we've seen as well. I think it's just trying to protect people. I think that's what's really key. And that's where I go back to, if you're all in the office at the same time, you can see when someone's had a really bad call, you can hear them on
Mm.
it. Someone could even like get it transferred over to a senior if they're in that room. So, look, I'm going to step in here, or, if that's really difficult, let's terminate it, let's come back to it. But when you're on your own at home, that can feel really lonely. And I think that's one of the struggles with this home working, isn't it? Your laptop's downstairs, or it's, in your lounge, or sometimes it's in people's bedrooms. It's really
Mm.
hard to then move away from that.
Yeah.
Really guilty, and like, oh, actually, this person's aggressive to me in my house. How do we control that? We can't control people's behavior all the time, and I think that's the biggest issue. I think our analogy was there's always one in every building.
Oh, there is definitely, and it's, I talk about lone working all the time, but something that's come out of a lot of my talks actually and conversations that I've had with people around lone working is it isn't just about when you go to site on your own and there's that perceived risk potentially of somebody attacking you or verbally abusing you or anything like that. That isn't just what lone working is. Lone working is, as you say, when you're at home and your laptop's just there and you've seen the email pop up on your phone, you think, oh, I'll just go and look at that, and then it's that perception of actually I feel attacked and I'm in my own home and I'm starting to feel alone with all of this, and moving that lone working discussion to being alone and working and worrying about stuff, and that leads to burnout, and it leads to all sorts of horrible health conditions that I've personally suffered with. So yeah, it's not a nice place to be. So I completely get that. There's a place for home working, and there's
Mm.
absolutely a place for being in the office where you can get a little bit more support.
Yeah, I think if you get that balance right, then it's great, isn't it? It's also having got, self-control around those individuals who are at home. Like you said, you see that thing pop up on your phone and it's maybe 6 in the morning. You're not contracted to work to 9, but you're going to check it anyway.
Mm,
It just starts your day off on probably a really negative point. Or, you've seen something coming on a weekend. I'm as worse as anyone for it, checking emails all the time when I shouldn't been. And,
mm,
again, when you're at that sort of level, I guess you feel sort of you need to see what's going on out of hours and weekends. But again, you can get something on at all sort of times of night that can just then change your evening, just change how
yeah.
you're going to sit on the sofa with your wife and your children because you've just had that come in, and it's just, it's really impactful.
Mm,
So I think, I found a slightly better way of doing it, but actually, I had to be really strict myself. So, right, I'm not gonna check my emails at that point. I'm gonna try and only log on then and really keep it within those sort of core hours.
It is hard though because it becomes a habit as well. Like if you're on your phone and because I've only got stupidly maybe, but I've only got one phone. I don't have a work phone because I just know that it all needs to be in one place for me. I can't handle the two phone scenario, but it becomes a habit. You check your WhatsApp and then you check your email and then check your social media or your LinkedIn or whatever. And it's getting out of that habit then, isn't it? That oh, I don't
Yeah,
want to click onto my email because I don't want to see anything that's in there this weekend, kind of
yeah.
thing. So
But it's just easy, isn't it? Like you said, it's on your phone. I've got it on
mm,
my personal phone. You can have your Outlook on there, and it's just easy
yeah,
there to just quickly flip through it. And it's just like, well, actually, maybe as business managers and owners, we need to make that more difficult for staff and go, actually, don't want you to be able to log in and perform outside of your core working hours and want you to have that break. I mean, obviously,
yeah,
Labour were talking about bringing in that rule that, people couldn't be contacted outside of their core working hours. And there's something to that, isn't it? As you said, Jodie,
mm,
it's about recharging, coming in refreshed, coming on that Monday, you saw your last email Friday night, that was your end point. Our industry is so different to others, isn't it? Where it doesn't stop at 5 o'clock on a Friday
no,
night. You can come into 100 emails and whatever emergencies have gone on and all sorts.
mm,
And you can react to it, but if you've got other services in place to deal with things outside of those hours to make sure things keep happening, then certain people can have those well-earned breaks, I feel.
yeah. What's improved in our industry, do you think, over the time that you've spent in it over the last 20 years? What's improved and what do you still think needs attention?
I think there's a greater understanding of the industry slightly. I mean, it's a bit misperceived perhaps in the press more recently, but I think, well, leaseholders are certainly more empowered, so they know more, and that is good and bad, I would say. I think, the industry itself is sort of more supportive. I think what obviously the TPI are doing and their merger from the IRPM and ARMA was a great
Mm,
a great move, and certainly for on a personal level, I always felt going to those events and training sessions made me feel more empowered. And
mm,
again, going along and seeing that there's loads of individuals who are dealing with exactly the same stuff and exactly the same kind of people goes, okay, it's not just me and it's not just
yeah,
this. It's the job
yeah.
is the reality. And I do feel there's much greater support out there for that. And then the documents you can unreasonable behavior policy being written for us to provide. It's like, well, that's
Oh, I
great.
know.
And that's,
Legend.
yeah, and it shouldn't have to be written, but it's there and it's really supportive. So it's those kind of changes, I think that are really good. I think we've still got a long way to go. I mean, I think, there's quite a good I can't remember who talked about it, one of the things, but someone looking at just sort of fee levels.
Mm,
How do we come up with a fee and then stick with it? Having done how long I've done this job, I mainly was the one pitching the business, going out, coming up with a fee proposal. And sometimes you're doing that on quite a quick site visit, a quick chat with a few of the directors, and it all sounds great, and you go in with X amount of money, and then it can turn out to be an absolute nightmare because they didn't tell you about Mrs. Miggins,
mm,
who likes to send 20 emails a day and letters and has sued the management company before, won't let anyone to her flat, and suddenly that site becomes quite financially unmanageable
yeah.
and not worth it. So when do you step away? When do you not step away? And I think, that's so therefore that sort of old school flat rate of, oh, it's 10 flats, I'm going to charge £2,000 or £200 a unit, etc., is a bit outdated. And maybe there has
Mm,
to be a better mechanism for, that site where you suddenly get drawn into lots of things so you can bring in these extra charges. I know with the sort of the new management agreements that are created, there's more of a schedule at the back, where you can sort of add on these extra costs. But
mm,
I think it's about the industry trying to evolve into that. At some point, it felt like there was a bit of a race to the bottom with other people popping up, non-qualified. They'd manage your block for £80 a unit. Okay,
yeah.
great. There's enough of them out there, and until regulation comes, they will still be there. So that will help sort of mop it up. But until then, there's always someone who's going to do it cheaper. And
Yeah.
we've lost clients. They've gone to those people. They've come back again when they got what they paid for, which was very little. But I think there's a market for everybody, isn't there? I think I just kind of feel managing agents are undervalued. I've always felt
Mm,
that. Feel that people don't want to pay us the right value because they don't see the worth to it. And again, I'm hoping maybe with more regulation and again qualifications for individuals, there's more justification to increase our fees. But trying to do that at a time when they're paying more for their buildings insurance, they're paying more
mm,
for their utilities, they're paying more for building costs because everything's gone up, and suddenly now managing agents want to put their costs up. It's just going to look like we're trying to rinse people ultimately. And let's be honest, we haven't had a lot of good reputation out there recently. So how do we get that across by, you know, showing what value we have? I always sort of said when people go, what do you do? Well, I'm a property manager. What does that mean? Well, I'm an accountant, I'm a builder, I'm a counsellor, mediator.
Yeah.
You
Social
have to,
worker.
yeah, you have to be so skilled at everything, but someone only
Yeah.
wants to pay you a few quid. I used to break down our fee per day. Sometimes I go, well, do you know how much you pay us? And it'd be like, no, it'd be like 12p a day. I'd be like, oh, okay, right. So when you're sending 40 emails a day from all your different leaseholders, it's not really great value, is it? So
Mm,
it's going to be some sort of education that's going to have to be
I
looked at,
agree.
but that's a big project in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's got to start with going back to when people buy flats and they understand what their liabilities are, and
Mm,
solicitors and the estate agents telling them all the clauses. You can do this, you can't do that. Here's your liabilities. Just basic stuff. Have you got a sinking fund? Is there a plan for that building? We know what it's like. People fall in love with an amazing flat, don't really look around the rest of the building and realize there's £100,000 roof project coming up that is going to cost
mm.
them a bit of cash. So education is all round. It does amaze me how many people buy a flat and haven't got a
Oh,
clue
I agree. I
buying
agree.
into.
I agree completely, Adam. It needs to start with estate agents, and then if it bypasses the estate agent, then at least the solicitor, because by the time it gets to us as managing agents, it's too late. They've already bought
Absolutely.
that, or they're so far down the line by the time it gets to us doing their management packs, their sales packs, LP ones, whatever you want to call it.
Mm,
They've probably already spent loads of money on solicitors, and they've spent, that search is done, and all that kind of stuff, and it needs to be, the education needs to be there before it gets to the professionals, if you like. So, it is quite hard to try and, especially first time buyers. And I actually feel quite sorry for first time buyers because you don't know what you don't know, do you?
no,
And
leases are complicated,
they are.
especially the older ones. They're so ambiguous, no commas, no things here. It's just like, what you read it, you go, oh, I haven't got a clue, at least modern ones are better. But, some sort of education in that is really important. Key takeaways, again, I can't probably count on one hand how many leaseholders I've met in my time who've actually read their lease.
No, I know. Yeah.
It is far and few between. You think, wow, you spent X hundreds of thousands of pounds, and yet you don't actually know your legal document that is all about your flat. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and what you can and can't do, and
yeah.
and what your neighbours can and can't do. Yeah, it's certainly crazy. But moving on then to you stepping down and moving forward, if you like.
Mm.
Um, was it a difficult decision for you to step down after 20 years?
Yeah, absolutely. Huge decision for me, personally. I mean, been there a really long time. I mean, it's almost like Hillcrest is almost all I know in terms of
Mm,
my employment journey. Yeah, really difficult. I think, let's guess it again, sort of, there'll probably be quite a few people who are surprised, I'm at the top of my ladder in that little world. I'm where I am, why would I do that? But I think, there comes a time when a few things just sort of aligned for me. I had a bit of a poor run of sort of bad health end of last year and for quite a few months at the beginning of this year, which I think made me really refocus.
hmm
Quite a young family at home. I've got a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. I'm 50 this year, so I'm a more mature dad, shall we say? So, the work-life balance at home is more challenging with those two because they want a lot of daddy time. So I was finding, I just couldn't really give them as much as I wanted to, or like I said to you earlier, when you get that bad email, my mood would sort of switch, and generally could find I'd be a bit more grumpy with the kids than I wanted to be, and I thought, well, that's not where it's not where I want
Yeah.
to be. And actually, me and my wife had quite a long journey on our sort of fertility journey to sort of get to where we wanted to get to. So the thought of, having these kids and then not really giving them the full attention felt, well, what am I doing here?
Mm,
So yeah, difficult decision. Great team, loved it there. Wouldn't have been there for so long if I didn't,
of course.
enjoy what I did. So yeah, it was a really tough call. I'm still really fresh. Obviously, I did my LinkedIn post this morning. It was contractually
Yeah.
finished yesterday. I was off last week for sort of holiday, but so it's not going to feel real for quite a few weeks. And I'm sure at that point I'll be thinking, oh God, what's happening next? What do I do? But yeah, that timing was right for just me to have a bit of a break,
Yeah.
recharge those batteries, give someone else a chance there. I think sometimes, I guess when I touched on it earlier about the legacy of doing things I shouldn't have been involved in there, I probably would always still be doing that as long as I'm there.
Mm,
So actually having a change, this might be quite a good refresh for the company. Might make them sort of look at those bits and go, great, those can all sit with someone else now. They didn't need to be at MD level. That's brilliant. And yeah, I think there wasn't a single person apart from my team, when I was telling them what I was doing, didn't go, that sounds like a really nice idea, Adam,
mm.
just you're gonna I mean, obviously, like I said, I'm not going to another job. I haven't got anything planned. I'm not moving to another managing agent. I'm just going to take ideally a few months out, recharge, spend that time with the kids, support them over the
Hmm.
sort of holidays, and see what comes along. Because certainly when you do, you're at this level, there's no opportunity to think about what you might want to do next because there's no brain space.
No, yeah, yeah. It is really hard to think, just to think straight in general, isn't it? I mean, I'm with you.
Mm.
I've got a 5.5-year-old. She's intense, bless her. But yeah, it's hardcore. It's hard to try and keep all the plates spinning.
Yeah, I think most people I've seen, and again, and I talk mainly in the sort of property manager role, who've really struggled when they've had kids, with that work-life balance and trying to be present. You've got an AGM to do, and you've got to take that phone call then, but you want to try and help do a bit of bedtime.
Mm,
That juggle is really challenging. A couple of my team had to sort of move into different roles so we could support them with that. One of them stepped up to be a property manager, and then I was like, oh, actually, they can't do that because it is too much around my kids, and wanted to be more part-time to do school stuff. So, I think we've been really flexible in trying to support the team as much as possible, but it's really hard to give 100% on both sides.
mm,
Something's got to give, and I think that's where I felt I wasn't maybe giving 100% there or 100% there, and therefore there was compromise, and that's not what I want to be known for.
mm.
And so yeah, it feels okay at the minute.
Yeah, it's the right time. But thank you for sharing that actually, because obviously I talk to a lot of ladies who have got kids and they're, trying to parent and be, amazing at work and amazing at home and doing all of the, as I said, all the plate spinning. So to hear it from your perspective from a male perspective as well, especially as the length of time you've been in the industry and now you're with your young family, it's really refreshing to hear. So thank you for being so honest.
Mm.
Appreciate it.
No, it's fine. I think, it's really important. It's real, isn't it? I
Mm.
mean, I think, there's a story. It's quite an interesting story that we had, which linked to sort of one of our most famous Hillcrest moments. We call it Pigeon Gate. I think it happened in 2018, December 2018, where somebody took a photo of some spikes and some trees in Bristol, and it sort of went viral on Twitter. How dare they? How dare somebody try to stop birds, roosting in trees? This was obviously a couple of weeks before Christmas. Parliament had broken. There wasn't much news going on. And I think I got contacted on that maybe the Wednesday or something, saying, "Oh, look, there's local news. We were going to do a story on this." And I was like, "Okay." If you got a statement, and it was like, I think they released sort of something fairly standard. And the next day, actually, I had the day off because me and my wife were going to the clinic because we'd had IVF and we were going
Hmm.
in to see the scan. And I remember driving there, and then it was on the Jeremy Vine show. As we were
Okay.
driving to the appointment, it was suddenly on BBC Two, and Jeremy Vine was talking about it, and there was quite a lot of outrage about it. And I was thinking, God, this is really blowing up. Obviously, it's meant to be quite a nice special day. We're going there and went to our appointment, heard a heartbeat, and we were all really excited. This was sort of great
Oh.
news. I think this was our fourth or fifth attempt, so
Hmm.
it's been quite a struggle to get to that point. And I think when I came back into work the next day, I was getting phone calls from Australia. It had just gone the mental. We made page three of The Sun, Who Done It. I've got some great paper clippings about it.
Oh,
And it
wow.
was
And you
just,
made page three,
there
you
you
made
go.
it. You
I
made
know,
it.
that's what I think. So, but just one of those stories, isn't it? And then, it's really frustrating because actually, the reality of it was there was a couple of branches that got spiked at low level. It being dramatized as people
Mm,
do. And then we had to really represent our clients who we'd obviously acted upon. It wasn't, it's not Hillcrest who's
no.
this one, it's the client's instruction. And we just got some really aggressive emails, lots of negative Google reviews. And I was
Oh.
literally, I spent most of my time the following week replying. I think I replied to every single person who sent me an email about it to
Hmm.
say, actually, that's not the true story. This is, if you take a bigger photo, you'll see there's a huge tree there. We've done a few lower branches, and people were amazed I replied, and they were very thankful and apologized. But
Mm.
it was just one of those juxtapositions of wow, best day of my life, getting that, and then really horrible, shocking work experience exploding all over the world. So
Yeah. But you made it to page three. So,
exactly,
we're all
yeah,
good.
yeah,
We're all good.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as you say, it takes away, sometimes this job does take away those really special personal family moments, and you just can't help but be pulled down by it. But yeah, again, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. So finally, I know you said you're taking a break, but is there anything you'd like to add before I let you go?
I think there's challenges to come, isn't it? I mean, am I leaving at a difficult time. I think, high-rise risk buildings, is challenging. We've got lots of those at Hillcrest. That was a challenge. The common hold discussion is an interesting one. The majority of our clients here are RMCs, and most of them own the freehold. So actually, it would be very similar to them being common hold. So actually, they've got the power. They can make choices. They can do what they want. I personally don't see common hold as the nirvana that it's being sold as, in certain aspects. And I think it's got a long way to go. And actually, they'll, yes, if they do it for new flats only, okay, maybe. But then what about the 5 million leaseholders that are still left?
Yeah.
What happens to them? So
Yeah. And you're still going to need a managing agent at the end of it.
exactly, yeah.
So
And again, relying on sort of normal directors who are lay people coming in to manage these buildings or complex sites is really hard. I think they're going to need support or training themselves. When it works well, it's great. We've got some clients who are so efficient, some of our RMC directors who are absolutely super efficient, run it like a business, run it like a machine, unemotional, follow the terms of the lease, collect the right amount of money, budget for major works projects, want a CapEx plan, all the stuff that's, is brilliant and makes you want to work for that client because they've got it, they've run it really well. But unfortunately, they are few and far between. Normally it's other people, they step in because maybe they want to get something resolved that's more beneficial to them, or they're thinking very short term. I guess in leasehold, you see quite a high turnover of flats, so people are only thinking about, well, this year, that year. Whereas again, really good managing directors of the RMCs are thinking 20 years ahead. Well, actually, we've got to think about how much money to collect. We've got to think about what we're going to do, the legacy we leave behind, protecting the buildings. So yeah, I think, those people will be key. Those are the ones I've sort of really enjoyed working with. And the other ones, I think, it's a lot of education on, isn't it? I think recruitment is the biggest struggle we've probably got going ahead. That was the sort of the biggest challenge I felt I was doing for quite a while was recruiting. If I went through a month where I wasn't recruiting, that was a happy month. And it's just because, people are leaving the industry. And it's not just because, it's not because people are leaving Hillcrest to go somewhere else. I think out of the last 20 property managers I had, 3 left to go to another managing agent and 17 left the industry. And there's not more people coming in. There's not another 17 property managers out there to go, great, we'll have that. So, that is a real challenge for us as an industry. If we're going to have to look after more flats and be more qualified, how are we going to do that? We need to support more people. I know the Trinity on our group, we're looking at starting an academy and trying to bring people in early, train them up and, and get them into the industry. And that's great, but that takes time. What I saw was people leaving with 8, 9, 10 years industry, and then they're being placed by someone who's got a year and they're coming in and they've got to manage difficult situations and complex sites. So, that'll be difficult, I think, for everybody. And I'm sure you've seen that in what you do, isn't it?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think there's still a 22% gap in the amount of jobs that there are available and the amount of people. There's just not enough people for the amount of jobs that need to be filled and or not the right amount of qualified people or people with that level of experience. The entry level side seems to be covered, but it's more the sort of the high level with that level of experience across the board. It seems to be that's where it's lacking. It's a challenging time. I don't think this challenge is going anywhere anytime soon. I feel for the recruiters of our industry. They must be tearing their hair out. Yeah, it's not an easy job. Not an easy job all round.
No, and I think, those who are in it know that, don't they? And I think, that's why that sort of bonding when you go to these industry events is great. I think what always worried me was when you see the speakers at these things, they always go, I'd never do what you do, when they talk about property managers, they think, God, why do we say that? Because, that's what we do, isn't it? I think you do have to be a certain person to do it, because, multi-skilled, juggle those plates, really organized is absolutely key, in this industry with all the different things you're working on. But there are great people in it, I've loved working in it, love my teams, love the supplier side and the contractor side. Made some great friends for life. But yeah, looking forward to see what might happen next, I guess, whatever that may be. Well, it's my allotment mainly this week, apart from potatoes. So that's
plants and potatoes. Get some fruit on the go. I don't really know what you plant this time of year. I'm not really green fingered. I just go to Tesco. Best of luck with everything that you're doing, Adam, and I look forward to seeing what's next for you.
Lovely. Thank you for your time, Jodie.
No worries. Thanks then. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my latest podcast. You can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram. The links are in the show notes. Or you can contact me on jodie@jodiefraser.com. For more content and updates, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favourite platforms. Thank you once again for listening. Until next time, take care.